Welcome to The Roots of Day, a world-building channel where we are exploring and practicing masculine storytelling. I'm Philip Wardman. I'm the author of a novel called The House of Noth, which is currently not available, but it will be again in October. And building up to that, we are delving into some of the lore of this world to prepare your mind for what it is going to experience when it reads that novel. We are currently releasing The Curse of Imnia, a series of relatively short episodes, short chapters that chronicle and navigate the story of Imnia, the patriarch of an important people in the House of Noth, the novel. And that is releasing on the 1st of every month, so if you want to jump in, get in on the action, then you can subscribe to the channel and like and ring the notification bell and all of those nice things, and then you will be informed about those being released. And you can catch up on the first 4 and shortly after this 5 episodes of that series to give you a bit of a glimpse into the conflicts and the peoples and the intrigue and nature of this world. And also in build-up to that, we are currently looking through some of the older things on this channel, among which one also can find the Lion's Chronicle, which is a series of shorts, 24 shorts that have now been compiled to bring you this complete version in one video of the Lion's Chronicle. So if you watch this, this is a compilation of a number of shorts that were produced over the course of about a year by me during the end of my studies in Germany. So what I was doing here is I was not sure if putting out lore, publishing lore in the form of videos was really a good idea, but I also found that it helped me to just put stuff on paper and to explore. And so I found a relatively niche part of the world's history, of the history of the Roots of Day, that I then tackled in this format and brought to you, the people. So you can now watch that and engage with that. Leave your thoughts and impressions in the comments. Let me know how it lands with you. I'm still thinking about this thing of lore in the format of videos, and we've been releasing lore videos on Mondays in the form of Mythos Monday and on Fridays, Fantastical Fridays. So you can still see some lore there in a more informal setting. But I do prefer having the tome which you work on in secret when it comes to the lore. That's why I'm also a bit hesitant to publish things, because once you've published them, they feel a bit more concrete. Although I am realizing technically you can just sort of say, I'm scrapping this thing that I've built up and I'm starting again from new, which sometimes is necessary. That's not at all what I'm thinking of doing. The things that I am bringing out at this point are still very much the things that are central to the lore of the world, and that's why those things are relatively immovable for the stories that I'm telling. So you can really indulge in this and internalize it, what you're about to see. But I am, as a result, hesitant to just produce a whole bunch of stuff en masse to present this world to you. What I do want to focus on more though is art, of which you will now be seeing some. So take that in, and if you have any thoughts and ideas, you can comment about that again, and you can also join the Discord and engage more directly, especially if you are an artist or the like. Then it would be very helpful to gain your insights and to exchange some ideas, especially when it comes to the design and the particular look and aesthetic of particular peoples and things in the world. So those are things where I'm now beginning to experiment, so that one can gain a relatively high amount of detail without necessarily overcomplicating the structures and the mysteries of the world that one is moving through and coming into if you are new. So without further ado, I present to you the Lion's Chronicle.
In the time before the 7 suns, when all the world lay in the shadow of the shattering of day, the children of Othan fled into the east. There, upon the shores that look out over endless tides of grey, the children of Othan builded for themselves a fortress in which to save themselves from the darkness that prevailed over the world. Chief among them was one named Munoth, the third son of Odhan. Ever having been pursued by his elder brother, Death, he grew cunning in the craft of stone, and so his sons also learned the fear of his hands, and builded with him the foundation of the fortress on the strand. Then they raised its many chambers and passageways, until it rose like a warning finger into heaven. It was a powerful fastness, built for the purpose of keeping Death out. For the eldest son of Odhan, Death, the firstborn, had betrayed his parents, and had been set by dark powers upon all his siblings, intent to devour them. The first refuge of men stood tall above the waterways of the east, the Tower of Munoth. Of such a high craft were the walls, that not even Death could enter them, and the ancients dwelt there in peace. It was only upon venturing into the surrounding coastlands that Death threatened. Yet there was a weapon which had come into the care of Munoth's house, a sword forged of a splinter of broken day, wielded by the eldest of Munoth's 3 sons, Furath. The twilight splinter guarded the passage of the foraging companies that came and went from the towering hive. Where the blade went, Death fled, and the company of Furath remained safe. Upon a time, however, amid the endless dark before the 7 suns, whilst Furath had ventured alone from his father's abode, Death chanced upon Hamath, the third and youngest son of Munoth, watching from the wall. Whispering into the youngling's ear, Death gained entrance into the tower, and there slew all of the children of Odhan. Alone Hamath and his brother, Nairoth, the sons of Munoth, fled, and Munoth the builder himself was made a prisoner in the tower for the rest of his days, witless of the fate that befell his children. Scattered in the wilderness of a world that had quickly forgotten the light that had shaped it, the 3 sons of Munoth each thought themselves the last of mankind. The eldest, having returned to the tower and finding it ravaged, had fled in despair. He followed the strand until it took him to a high fell, from which he thought to cast himself. Yet there, upon a stone, sat a dwarf. It drew out of the water below a lady as a daughter of Odhan, yet with eyes as grey as the saltwash. She was given to Furath, that he might think less of himself, and more of her. Nairoth, the second-born, fled westward. When he grew faint, for he had strayed into a barren land, he also found a dwarf, seated upon a rock. And this dwarf drew for him a companion from the earth. She, too, was like unto the daughters of Odhan, yet her eyes were dark as chestnut. Hamath, however, barely a man, was near madness with guilt, when he came upon a dwarf's fireside. It drew for him a comforter from the flames, her eyes of green fire. Furath led his new companion further north. He named her Newman for her grey eyes, and she taught him the way of the water, so that he was able to dive beneath the salty brine alongside the ancient drakes that there kept the watch. Newman bore him 9 sons and 3 daughters. Together with these, Furath mastered the craft of shipwright, felling the great trees that grew in forests on the shore. For an age to which only the distant stars bore witness, the children of Furath roamed the strand. Early did they stray from the light of their father's sword. Yet one day, enraged at his father's sternness, a son named Kalath forsook his father's light, and vanished into the darkness of the mountains, called by them Minil Nu. Minil Nu, the grey fells. These mountains were home to the masons of the underworld, the stone goblins as some called them, but most know them as trolls. In the light of primordial day, the trolls had awoken beneath the earth, and when the dwarfs had led them to the surface, they scowled at the light of the World Tree, turning back into the gloom that their eyes had grown used to. All such creatures were called goblins by the ancients, and in the light of day they had lived in peaceable trade with them, gathering delightful wealth from deep beneath the roots of day. For a time without years, Furath and Numan mourned for their son, Calath, for never had a child of Othan been known to leave the light of day and evade the watchful prowling of death, the firstborn. But at the end of their mourning, the trolls that had kept themselves hidden emerged on the surface, fleeing the mountain that had been their home. Like rats from their nest, the trolls poured from the mountains, and when they came upon the light of Furath's blade, they cursed him and asked him why he had assaulted them in the peaceful dark below the earth. Furath, bewildered by their accusation, asked their chieftain what had driven them from their lair. In truth, Calath had descended into the deep places beneath Minilnu, and there he had uncovered the veins of daylight that yet glimmered in that root of day. With this act, the great caverns in the mountains had been flooded with the light as with that of a second day tree. Hearing that his son yet lived, and that other daylight beside the sword of Munath had been found, Furath and his children descended into the caverns of the fells, whilst the trolls settled the dark crags above. Beneath the mountain, Furath and his children discovered Calath armed with raiment of daylight, which he had wrought of the veins he had found. Said Calath, "Now, father, you shall have little command over me, for where I go the daylight shall be tenfold what it was with you." And as Furath went to embrace the son whom he had thought dead, Calath raised the threatening blade which he had wrought, and said, "You rejoice to see me, son of Munath, but I will forsake these halls, only because you have tainted them with your presence. I want nothing to do with the heritage of Othan." And Calath departed from Minilnu. Furath, however, built a city in the glowing innards of the fells, for Numan loved the remnant of daylight, and the waters within the mountain. That is why the city was named Thalath Numan. And so Calath departed Minilnu. Only one thing haunted his dreams: to find and slay death once and for all, and to put an end to the fear of men. And so he returned to the Tower of Munath, of which his father had spoken often with warning words. When he did not find death there, he wandered westward, following the rivers that brought life to the great plains of the Easterland. Nowhere did he find death, though he was often harried by the dark creatures that had begun to frequent more often the roots of day since its breaking. It was in his wandering that Calath came upon the signs of men that yet lived, and lastly came upon a dwelling of the children of Nairoth, second son of Munath. Nairoth fled Deen Munath after death breached its walls. He fled into the west, never once looking back. Yet the further he strove into the wilderness of the plains there, the more barren the lands became. The country that had once run with rivers now was scarred and empty. Only when he was at the utmost end of his strength did he look up to see a dwarf upon a stone. This dwarf called forth a lady from the earth there, and gave her to Nairoth to wife. Nairoth was then given some light of day, by which his strength returned. He named the woman that had been entrusted to his care Human, for she would be a vessel of much life. After his rest, Nairoth was guided into the hills that are called veiled for the mists that most often cling to them. There he learned many of the dwarfish crafts with time. Under the tutelage of the dwarfs, Nairoth learned about the veins of daylight amber that yet flowed throughout the roots of day. He also learned that another of the 12 sons of Othan had fled into the veiled hills and escaped the ravages of death. This forgotten son of Othan was only ever called by the dwarfs Avath Davirim, the friend of dwarfs. That title they now bestowed on Nairoth and upon all his children,
Thuman bore Nyroth many children, and she would spend long hours with them, tending the gardens of the dwarfs, until Nyroth desired to find a country of his own. The dwarfs thought well of his plans, and helped him craft devices of daylight that would keep death from his lands. So cunning was his craft that soon he had unstopped the springs of the earth, and rivers flowed freely once more through all that region.
Caloth watched his forgotten kindred from the wilds, until a rumor of a man born of daylight had spread among the children of Nyroth. The region in which they dwelt was called Thurugniroth, which means Nyroth's refuge in the old tongue. Caloth watched them, wondering how it could be that other children of Othan had escaped death's grasp. Only when a wanton band of trolls struck out at one of Nyroth's strongholds, and all seemed dire, did Caloth step out into the open. His long time in the wilderness alone had made him savage and cruel, and the trolls fell before his twilight splinter as shadows fall before the dawn. The children of Nyroth received him with great wonder, yet the dwarfs did not permit Caloth into the Veiled Hills, for they knew that he had dishonored his father, Furoth, by forsaking him without leave. The stars wound over the world in their ever-watchful march, drawing along the passage of Caloth's stay in Thurugniroth. Here he asked concerning the history of this people, wondering how they had gained power over daylight as he himself. There he spoke much with the daughter of Nyroth, who won his heart from him, and reminded him of the gentleness he had known only from his mother. Word of this foreign son of Othan reached Nyroth at length, and he held counsel with the dwarfs, who told him Caloth's tale. Enraged, the second son of Munoth sought the armored kinsman out, and upon finding him, spoke dwarfish words over his war gear, so that it lost its light. Then Caloth was cast out from among the children of Nyroth as well, amid the weeping of Withmen, whom Caloth loved. Greatly troubled at the dark tale of his nephew, Caloth, yet hopeful at the news that his brother might yet be alive, Nyroth set out toward the northern country, in which Min-el-Nu was rumored to roost above ancient woodland and briny coast. He departed, leaving his lands in the care of his eldest son, Enoth. As for Caloth, he wandered in the shadow that covered all the roots of day, his armor twisted and black with the loss of its light, his blade cruel and bent to resemble a scythe. It was like this that Death, the firstborn son of Othan, who in the speech of ancients was called Moth, found him. But seeing the darkness that had found a hold on the heart of Caloth, despite the armor that had once been so bright, he took him captive instead of devouring him, as he had done with most of his fathers. Nyroth traveled through the safety of the Veiled Hills. When he reached their boundary, he strode fearlessly into the dark, and there the rumor of him went among the wicked wolds that had become the place of the Lathiel of night, great powers that had been amid the stars as witnesses for the forging of primordial day. Like two lamps of burning fire, the immortal eyes of Nyroth forged a path through the shadow of the night, and when he felt the presence of the dark Lathiel draw near, he spoke dwarfish words over the way he trod, and it began to glow, as had the tree called Day, in a time before Nyroth had walked amid its roots. At length he passed through rugged vale and wold, and came upon the jagged teeth amid which hove the stone Gavliel, the trolls that had fled the veins of daylight beneath those fells called Min-el-Nu. The trolls allowed Nyroth to pass into the mountains, though the goblins of all their various kinds were beginning to grow weary of the children of Othan, for often had they been driven from one place to another by the daylight which they wielded. At first the children of Furoth frighted to see so powerful a man, and wondered if it was Munoth himself returned from the dead. They did not know that Munoth was a prisoner in his tower. But Nyroth explained himself to them, and was brought to stand before the 8 judges of Thalath Numen. They told him that their father, Fiorath, had gone out in search of his lost son, Calath, for his absence had driven Numen, the great love of Fiorath, near the brink of death. Day and night her 3 daughters watched over her, waiting with dim hope for their father's return. With nothing more than the twilight splinter in hand, which Fiorath had received from his father in prior days, he wandered into the darkling world, seeking whatever trace of his son he might find. He followed the rumor of him towards the Tower of Munath, but along the way he encountered a lonely forest goblin, which some call imps, and overheard it singing crudely a song to itself. The song told of a young man who had ventured out to meet the dwarfs and had been banished from their country, his armor black with night. Now this man with armor blackened was a servant of Odin's firstborn. When he had heard enough of the dreadful ballad, Fiorath revealed himself and demanded that the goblin show him where he might find the man of whom he sang. The goblin cowered before the gleaming splinter and screamed at first, yet then it chuckled and assured the son of Munath that it would guide him well.
It is said, where there are forest goblins, a tunnel goblin is not far off. These devilish swarms of flesh are enthusiasts for power, and are prone to worship anything greater than they themselves, quickly forming dark fellowships around their newfound idol. Often the great mole trolls, tunnel goblins, as they are also called, become the object of this misbegotten worship, for their strength in burrowing out holes in the ground. The imp on which Fiorath had come in his search now led him into the deeper part of the woods, which he had skirted, and there into a tunnel that emerged from a crude outcrop of stone. When he had been led some way into the earth, Fiorath was set upon by the horde of tiny goblins. Screeching and scratching, they removed his twilight splinter from him, and there, in the shadows before him, hidden from the countless eyes of heaven, the horned mole troll growled in the deep.
The imps brought their prey before the throne of their idol, a horn-browed father of darkness, so they called their patrons, Dark Fathers. The mole troll chuckled at the sight of the man, and said,
"Certainly, this is a direct son of Odin, from the mighty ever child. Of that race have I seen in my wicked hours, beneath the roots of day."
To which Fiorath replied, "If you know the name of my father, then you know my name also, for I am Fiorath, son of Munath." At his saying these words, the fury in his heart welled up in his eyes, and that ancient spring of daylight in the sons of Munath, which glowed in their eyes, burst forth radiant, blinding the Gavliel there gathered. The Dark Father of the imps roared with a thunder that caused the very stone to tremble, then ordered that the eyes of this son of Munath be cut from his head. The imps gathered with chattering teeth, surrounding their victim, and carried out their master's command. Robbed of his sight, Fiorath was abandoned in the dark passages which the mole troll had dug beneath the world. He scoured the tunnels and the deep places until he grew weary of a figure, though he had no eyes left to see. There stood his son, Calath, a shade of former glory, a corrupt remnant. All the life had been drawn from him. Wan and wrathful he wandered in the dark. When Calath then saw the man that had brought him into the world, he said, "Son of Munath, you did not see me when eyes you had. Now you shall see nothing but me, for I have grown familiar with darkness, and where the light of eyes cannot hold me, the dark of blindness reveals me." But Fiorath said, "I have always seen you, my son, yet also saw how great or how terrible you might become, and sought to guide you away from the dark." At this, Calath turned and left his father once more, to endless caverns in the deep. Years passed beneath the star-beaded heavens, and the daughters of Fiorath continued their endless vigil. Nyroth had once more ventured into the dark world, seeking his brother. It was in this time that one of the 8 judges of Thalath Numen departed Minilnu, and roamed westward with all of his children, for the mountains had grown too small for them. Bearing daylight upon their every member, they were called Dawn Fair, Galanthur. The name of this judge was Halath. His wife was Halmin, The Dawnfair roved westward into yet unknown lands, and where they went the daylight of their raiment drew many eyes. Eventually they strayed into the marches of those wicked wolds in which the dark Lothiel abode, and the light of their clothing dimmed somewhat. The longer they whiled within the wicked wolds, the craftier the assaults of the Dark Watchers grew, and like frightened sheep the children of Halath were scattered and led astray in piecemeal manner, and the journey of the Dawnfair seemed nigh to failure, when a sudden brilliance flared into the heavens above, where the fraying branches of Day's ancient canopy still hung suspended. The dwarves had seen the march of the Dawnfair into a distant land and recognized the sign that the age of 7 days had come. Thus they gathered the 7 fragments of Day, which had fallen into the sea when the World Tree had been riven, and forged of them 7 longboats. These they sent sailing into heaven from the faraway island in the east, which marks the uttermost entrance into the under-earth. As soon as the first of the 7 suns touched prow to the heavens, the world that yet remained amid the roots of Day was changed. The Lothiel lost much of their power, and were driven into the dark places beneath the eaves and mountains. The trolls that had fled the light of Day, that glimmered in its rotting roots, began to build for themselves great fortress bridges that shut out the sun. The lesser goblins and the monsters that are not known, yet rumored, only rearing when some brave hero presses into untamed marks, made for themselves nests and burrows where the 7 longboats could not cast their light. In such a world, the children of Munath breathed relief and began to settle the earth more freely and to multiply all the more. Yet in the light of Day, the light that was in them grew faint, and their eyes became like those of the mothers of men, taking the colours that those dwarf-born women had passed on to them. Halath and Halmeen brought their house into the mountainous country that skirts the southern shores of what is today called Middlemere by those people that surround it. For it is the middle of all the countries north of the Veiled Hills, where the dwarfs are hidden in the mist. In the light of the 7 suns, the mighty tools that the children of Munath had wrought lost their great power, for the metal's rod of daylight became brittle under the shining barges of heaven. These tools had been crafted alongside the twilight splinter and other mighty crafts, when the song of the ancients could no longer shape the stone. Thus new means of masonry had to be learned, and the dwellings of the Halathiel, the children of Halath, were more modest than those of their brethren in Minalnu. Because of this, they gained a hardihood beneath the 7 suns, and sought renown in feats of strength and in the hunting of the beasts of the wilderness. The children of Halath spread across the lands south and north of Middlemere. Many and branching are the tales of their deeds among the roots of Day. In later ages, even dealings and wars were had with the children of Nairath, and rumors of the children of Hamath were spread abroad with the sowing of Munath's seed. But these stories are too numerous to recount, and my interest in this chronicle is in showing how our king descends from Imnir, and also whence Imnir came, and whence he claimed his right of rule. When Halath, therefore, had grown ancient and mad, for 100 years passed as a decade for the deathless immortals of old, and Halmeen had departed to roam the lands north of Middlemere, to ward over her children there. A son was born to Eroth, son of Myloth, who was a younger son of Halath. This child's name was Imnir. It was in this time that one of the children of Nairath broke the tongue of Odhan, and as such, all the children of Munath became confused in their speech, for all of their tongues were descended of Odhan.